Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the broadcast. I am Dr. Brad Reedy. This is Evoke Therapy Program's podcast and broadcast. And tonight I'm going to be talking about winter and the holidays at Evoke. I'm really excited about this. It's kind of an annual tradition for me to talk about that. So I'm really excited to dive into it. Before I jump into tonight's content, I want to announce again an upcoming class. I just finished my second iteration of this class. Very excited to be continuing this and to be responding to people's passion and desire for it. It's an all-day conscious parenting workshop. So it's a combination of some lecturing on my part, but really it's an interactive, live video interactive on Zoom. It's limited to 24 participants. So that gives me enough time to give attention to each individual's needs, questions, case examples that they have from their life. And of course, the case example is often their life. So if you want to join me for a day of discussion, of learning about how to do this work and how to, what others call this transformation of consciousness, February 24th, 2022, you can contact intensives at evoketherapy.com or call our toll-free number at 866-411-6600. So tonight's broadcast, like I said, is an annual tradition. And really what it comes from is this place that, as I've been doing this work now, as I've been involved in wilderness therapy for close to 27 years, this time of the year becomes extra special for families. And that doesn't always mean extra happy and joyful. But sometimes, especially if you have a child struggling with mental health or addiction issues, and particularly if you have a child at Evoke's wilderness therapy program right now, it can be a time of the year that involves a lot of loss, a lot of grief. I wrote this afternoon as I was preparing for the broadcast this evening, and I wrote, "Winter is a cold, sacred, and often silent season." And I know that sounds a little bit poetic for a parenting broadcast, but really, it's a special time of the year, even for our wilderness folks. Some of the the most memorable holidays I've ever spent in my life have been out in the wilderness with the kids. Because you take away, I know we talk about this sometime about the December holidays and how it gets overtaken by commercialism and capitalism and presents and buying and all of the things that go on during this time of year. But really beneath that all, really beneath that all is a feeling that all of us share, which is it's a special time of a year to reflect. It's a time of the year to gather for families. But if you have a child in wilderness therapy, you have an empty seat at the table. And as painful and sad as that can be, and I myself have had this experience as a parent, there's something also extra special and profound that happens throughout the course of treatment in that context, both for the child in the wilderness and the parent at home. So when I've spent that time with children in wilderness on Christmas and Thanksgiving, it's been one of the most, or at least I was going to say one of the most special, but at least the most memorable holidays of the year because of all of the glitter stripped away and just really sitting there and connecting to each individual, connecting to their grief, to their pain, to their loss, to their want for connection, to their hope for future holiday seasons. And part of what we got like to create at home is this awareness that really being at Evoke in 2022, excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat. Being at Evoke in 2022 during the December holidays and the November holidays is a chance to look forward to many more holidays to come, to look forward. This is an investment. This year and the loss, the investment of time and money that you're making for your child and for your family, it's an investment in the holiday seasons coming up in 2023 and 24 and 25 and so on. So I just wanted to honor that with that sense. The staff out in the field are particularly sensitive also. We change our staff shifts so that those that are home for Christmas and Hanukkah don't have to excuse me, those that are away for Christmas or Hanukkah or the December holidays can be home for the Thanksgiving holiday. So they're extra long shifts. But with that, there comes a special feeling into the field. Part of what we try to do in the field is celebrate each and everybody's individual meaning that they're attached to with the December holidays. So letters, Gifts, I'll talk about those. Stories from home, traditions. I ask each student to talk about the tradition. Is it connected to and rooted in a religious theme? And if it is so, then we ask if the student is interested at all or willing to share that religious tradition with the rest of the group. So each person gets to be celebrated, each person gets to be honored, and each person's grief, even though a lot of our adolescents and young adults that are in the field might have a lot of family conflict at this time of the year, that conflict is melts a little bit, and there's a longing. And even if the family that they just left, that they might have been in high conflict with, there's still this longing for connection, for tradition, for ceremony, for a sense of belonging. So we try to engender that we're part of that process. And so spending time with children during the winter holidays and during the winter season for me is one of the most sacred things I've ever been able to participate in my life. And I used to half joke and half seriously say, if my children ever needed wilderness therapy, I would hope that they would need them in the winter, because the program is much more powerful and profound in the winter. You can take for granted in summer and some of the more mild seasons, you can take for granted the wilderness. It can feel like a summer camp feel, right? It's beautiful. It doesn't take a lot of effort. You transition into winter, cold, snow, rain. You have to be intentional. You have to work hard. There's not a lot of sunlight. And so your focus is increased and intensified. People have described psychotherapy sometimes as turning up the volume of life so that you can hear it. And being in wilderness therapy during the December holidays turns up the volume on life automatically. And while maybe it was my own karma, while talking about this idea of hoping that if I ever needed my child to go to wilderness, my child ever needed it, that December would be the time to do it, my child obliged. And he qualified himself for that exactly, and was with us, was with us in the field, not with us at home, with us in the field at Evoke during the holiday season. I, and when I talk about taking it for granted, I'm going to tell you one simple story that I've probably told once or twice over the years. Many years ago, during wintertime, one of the students came up to myself and the staff. We were having a clinical discussion talking about what we were going to be doing that day. And during that layover day, that non-hiking day that we had, while the therapist makes their visit, that was me at the time. They're asked to take showers or baths, to bathe themselves, get new laundry, get new food, clean out their backpacks, and prepare for the coming week. So we're sitting there in our little staff group talking, and one of the students comes up and he says, "Do I have to take a shower?" Or a billy bath, as they're called sometimes in the field. "Do I have to take a shower?" And the staff that was the senior staff for that week said, "Yes, you have to take the shower." And he said, "But I'm just going to be dirty minutes after I take the shower. It's windy. We're in the desert. That light, really fine, dusty sand in the desert that they have in southern Utah. If I take a shower, I'm going to be dirty minutes later." And the staff started to explain to him, to talk him out of his feeling. And I gently stopped the staff, and I said to the student that was complaining, I said, "You're right. You will be dirty in a sense, and you'll have to bathe again throughout the week. And it's difficult. And it's difficult to do in the cold. It's difficult to do in the desert. It's difficult to do in the sun shower that we have, the little shower we have set up for you." And I hear that. And the student relaxed immediately and then went over to the shower area as it was his turn and started to take a shower. And what I taught the staff at the time is it's hard. Wilderness therapy is hard. Wilderness therapy in the winter is hard. But what lesson that evokes, if you will, in the process is you can't take anything for granted. You have to work hard to make sure that the kids' hands and feet are warm and dry, that they're hydrated so their skin isn't cracking, that they're clothed, that they're cleaning themselves. And it takes a lot of effort. Years ago in my community, I was a part of the local Boy Scout troop while my son was a teenager. And they found out what I did for a living. I try to hide it sometimes, but they found out. So they thought to themselves, "Well, Brad is a wilderness expert. So we're gonna ask him to set up winter camping for our students, because that's one of the badges that the Boy Scouts would get. Brad's gonna lead the group in winter camping. So I did what I do at work, and I called my field director, the one who's in charge of teaching and training all of our field guides. And I said, look, I need some help. I'll pay you, but these people think that I know how to do this stuff, and I don't know that I'm just a therapist who works in wilderness therapy. So I need your expertise. His name is Sean. So Sean signed up and agreed. We went up to Cottonwood Canyon out of the Salt Lake Valley, where the snow was several feet deep at that point into the season. We had brought foil dinners that we had pre-made, so we had those with us, and we were setting up camp. And as we were setting up camp, the boys were in a snowball fight. Now, what I do know about wilderness therapy is a snowball fight might be fun if you're going to hop back in your car or sit immediately around a fire all evening and dry yourself and warm yourself out. But when you're going to go to bed afterwards, that snow that got down your shirt melts against the heat coming off your skin, turns into water, and you get really cold. So I'm trying to corral all these Boy Scouts, and I had the realization that week that the kids in the wilderness therapy program that I was running were more cooperative than the Boy Scouts that I was taking out. We did our best to corral them. It took longer than I anticipated to set up all their shelters so that they were well made and protected them from the potential snow that might be coming that evening. And then we sat around the fire to cook these foil dinners we had prepared. But it was getting dark. Everybody was starting to get cold at that point, and they came out half frozen and half burnt, as you might be able to imagine. We finished eating. We told the boys that we would come check on them after they went to their shelters, and then we cleaned up around the campfire. We did our rounds with the boys, made sure they were all safe and in their sleeping bags, and then we went back to our shelter. And I sat next to Sean, and I said, I don't know how you guys do this. I don't know how the field staff go out for 8 days in a row. And then on your week off, a lot of you spend time camping. I don't know how you do it. And Sean, I think well-versed, well taught, patiently listening to me complain, said, we do it because nothing is more real than this. And then again, I relaxed. And I realized what we were teaching the boys. It wasn't about how good the dinners were. It wasn't about how difficult it was for us to keep them organized and getting ready and going through the process of getting ready for bed. But it was the entire process that was real. We were all unplugged. We had no cell phone reception. We were away from screens, and we were just dealing with each other. And everything was right there: relationships, communication, problem solving, frustration tolerance, mostly on my part, by the way. Another story I've told, it's been a few years, is about when I was visiting the group in the early winter, just before the snow was falling, in that cold, rainy season where it's about 40 degrees outside and raining, hard to keep a campfire lit. I had to do sessions inside of my sleeping bag, sitting in my shelter, bringing the boys and the staff that were working with them one-on-one, bringing them into my shelter. We couldn't quite get a fire inside of the shelter that we had made because the wood was wet and it was smoking and filling up the tent. My eyes were burning. I don't particularly love the cold, having grown up in Southern California, so I was just struggling. After my first session, I turned to Steve. He was the staff that was running the group that week. And I said, Steve, I know it goes against tradition and policy, but I think I might have to do the rest of the sessions in my truck with a heater and the engine running. And I said, I'll give you 5 minutes to talk me out of that. Because I knew I was departing from our tradition, what we'd created, what we ask others to do. And Steve didn't need 5 minutes. He needed one sentence. He said, show them how to suffer. Immediately, my focus shifted. And I realized I was there again to show my students how to be human, how to deal with something difficult, something outside of my control. And the rest of that day and the next day that had similar weather, I was completely motivated by the idea that this is a process about being human. Years later, I went to visit my son during the wintertime. Not quite as cold, but rained the entire time that I was out there when he was in treatment, when he was one of our participants. And while it was raining, it made therapy difficult. It wasn't, again, it wasn't as easy because of the rain. And I remember thinking, the rain is ruining it. The rain is ruining my parent visit. All these years, at this point, 12 years into my career as a wilderness therapist, and some years into running this company, this wilderness therapy company, and my one visit was ruined. And I reflected back on Steve, and I realized that the therapy wasn't the talking that happened between us. I mean, there was something that was going on there, but again, it was being present, dealing with what is. The great thing about the weather in wilderness therapy is you can't control it. It is perhaps the best tool that I've ever seen to teach and embody for yourself a sense of surrender. And you don't need long lectures and lessons because the wilderness, the weather teaches it for you. As I say, you don't need to teach the law of the harvest to a farmer. He or she or they know the law already. The law of the harvest being what you reap is what you sow. But we have become so disconnected from nature, which is, somebody said one time, we are nature, so we become disconnected from ourselves, right? We're a part of nature. We are nature. And we become so disconnected from that, we become so disconnected from the intrinsic lessons that embracing and confronting and grappling with nature teach us. And so winter in the wilderness is difficult, uncomfortable at times. Now, I will tell you, children, as they go through the process of become more and more experienced, they take it in stride. Just like at home when they were children, we have to encourage them at times, really, really hold them accountable to wear their jackets. Kids from Southern California 6 weeks later are not wearing their jackets sitting out in the weather at 25 degrees. Constantly reminding me that children, like I've said before, what children taught me when I started this job, children are more resilient than they and their parents thought they were. I've seen parents come into the group bundled up to the neck, and seeing their child wear a simple sweater where their jacket's laying over by the rest of their gear, and the parents saying, "How you doing this?" And the student saying, "It's not even cold. It's not cold out here." So that's what I mean, that winter is a cold, sacred, and often silent season. It's a yearly time for us. I grew up in Southern California. I talk about that a lot. I still struggle at times with the weather. I loved sometimes when I go home and visit in Southern California and it's in February, 70 degrees outside, and the sun is shining and the palm trees are blowing in the wind. And I think to myself, how can people be depressed in this weather? In contrast to where I come from in Utah at the same time of year. But what the seasons teach us, of course, is they teach us about life and death and renewal. And in winter, we have to slow down. I say to the staff, slow down. We can't accomplish as many therapy groups in the winter. But remember, the therapy groups aren't what make this magic. They kind of anchor and become the cornerstone for treatment, but wilderness is the therapy. Wilderness is the teacher, the immovable object, the something that the children have to reckon with. And we know this about storytelling and mythology, right? We know that often people go into the wilderness. I think even in the Old Testament, David went into the wilderness to find himself. In the Old Testament, the Jews wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before they were ready to enter the promised land. That's all wonderful symbolism for the work. King Arthur's knights went into the forest where there was no path, where it was darkest. They thought that the most noble, because if there was a path, it was somebody else's path. Wilderness is rich with metaphor. We go in it, we get lost. and we find ourselves. I'm going to ruin a movie for you. If you, it's a recent movie, but I want to tell it to you because it's so powerful. We were watching the other night, The Woman King with Viola Davis, and somewhere in the first half of the movie, she was sharing with her close friend that she'd had a dream. If you don't want to listen to this and have this movie ruined, you can turn down the volume for about a minute. At any case, Viola Davis is the Woman King. She was sharing with her best friend about a dream, a nightmare she had had recently, and she was in the jungle, and she felt this beast, this being off in the distance. She could smell and sense this creature, this ominous creature that was coming to get her, and then she wakes up. Now, the movie makers led you to believe that there was this enemy of the kingdom who, by the way, had sexually assaulted her, and they showed you that incident. So you were thinking that this guy that was coming to confront her kingdom was this enemy. But as the movie goes on, she confesses late that person in the jungle was her. When Luke Skywalker went to do his training, he went to a planet that was murky and cloudy, like a jungle. He actually walked out into the jungle during one of his trainings and had a vision of fighting Darth Vader. And after he cut off Vader's head, the mask rolled over and the plastic or whatever it was burned off, and it was Luke. We go to these places to confront ourselves. The heroic journey is inside of here. The journey towards self-discovery, the place, the cave that we fear to enter is in here. And wilderness is a powerful metaphor. In this beautiful, sacred time of the year is perhaps the best time to do this work. First of all, I want to tell you this. The first thing that happens in wilderness therapy is safety. Safety first. And again, staff have complained to me over the course of my career that it's so difficult to get anything done therapeutically because they're constantly making sure the kids' feet are dry. We don't rely on the kids' self-care. So many of the kids have poor self-care. So we don't rely on their safety by how well they do their own self-care. We do it for them if they can't or they won't. So we're constantly checking their fingers and their feet, making sure they're clean, making sure the skin is not compromised, that they have good capillary refill. We're constantly checking. The staff are taking notes on that twice a day at least, filling out paperwork on that each day. If the weather is going to be intense, we have wall tents that they can go to where there's wood-burning stoves. But I will tell you this, most often the students don't want to sleep in the wall tents. They like to use it to get warm and dry, but they like to sleep under the stars. But we have that available. We change elevation and locations based on the season. So we operate in the high desert of southern Utah, but within the range of land that we have access to, we move because there are parts of the desert that are more mild during the winter and other parts that are more mild during the summer. So we're moving location. They have hot food every day in wilderness therapy. That is a state law, and we exceed that. They are either sitting next to a fire, warming themselves up. They are in their sleeping bags, which are rated far beneath the temperature that it ever gets out there, or they're hiking and moving their body. Even making a fire by rubbing sticks together. The old idea in wilderness therapy is it gets you warm twice. Even if you don't bust a fire, that's the term that they use when the fire comes out of that process. Even if they don't bust a fire, the act of bow drill firing of that motion warms you up. So they're either by a fire in their sleeping bag or they're doing something active. We don't hike in certain temperatures. Again, there's a state threshold that is required, that if it gets below a certain temperature in the winter or above in the summer for that matter, then we don't hike so that we can focus on self-care and safety. And we exceed that by several degrees. We don't come close to that line. The staff call in twice a day from the group just by routine, let alone if they need anything. To check in, to talk about location, to give a health check-in for all of the students. The backup support staff that are at our base camp, they're monitoring the weather. They're monitoring the location of all the groups. They're making sure that everybody is safe from a 10,000 foot perspective and viewpoint. Like I said, they monitor their feet, their hands, their hydration. Each student has one staff assigned to them. So on average, let's say the group is a group of 9 and there are 4 staff. That's a very typical group size. Then each staff member will have 2 students, and the leader of the staff team will just have, if it's an odd number, we'll just have the 1 student, so that he or she or they can kind of supervise the whole group. But that person is in charge of making sure everything clinically is going along and everything physically is being kept safe. Any medical needs, they can call our medical staff, and if the medical staff have any doubt, then a student will be pulled from the field and examined by professionals outside of the field. And like I said, when staff complain about the short winter days, how much of their time, because you can't take it for granted, gets consumed by the activities of keeping the young people safe, worrying that they're not getting the therapy assignments that the staff left for the group as a whole done for any given week. We remind them this is the therapy. And with children, you see, here's the thing with children, more so than with adults. And when I talk about children, I'm referring to people 25 years and younger, because the adolescent brain, the brain doesn't develop to full adulthood until somewhere around the mid-20s, 25, give or take. So with children, the language of children is not always verbal. When I was working with young children being trained as a play therapist, one of the adages that a famous play therapy theorist would talk about and teach about is that play is the language of children. So if your child's therapist at Evoke or outside of Evoke is playing checkers with the child, they're not playing checkers with the child. They're doing therapy with the child. If your child's therapist is working with your young child and building blocks or making art, they're not building blocks or making art. They're doing therapy. And similarly in our program with adolescents, 13 to 25-year-old adolescents, the therapy that walks through the front door and introduces itself gets rejected by the child. That's why I invented the idea of what I call at home grocery store therapy, grocery store lectures, where I take my children go grocery shopping with me, and the conversations are brief and short and are shoulder to shoulder instead of face to face, knee to knee. Therapy that introduces itself through the front door is most often rejected by children. So you've got to find a way around the defense, the wall that they put up. I remember listening to a commercial many years ago. Can't find it. I've looked for it. If anyone can find this, I will reward you gladly. It was a commercial on the radio by Derek Jeter, who's a Hall of Fame baseball player, the captain of the New York Yankees in the late 90s and early 2000s. And Derek Jeter is talking about how his father taught him about baseball growing up, and his father coached his teams, and he taught him about teamwork, about having an open mental attitude, being coachable, being accountable for your mistakes, being accountable to your teammates. And he listed off a half a dozen ideas that his father taught him about baseball. And then he concluded the commercial by saying, my dad wasn't teaching me about baseball, but he was teaching me about life. That is the essence of wilderness therapy. It's effective for many reasons. Perhaps the biggest one is because you go around the defense. You use metaphor, you use ritual and ceremony. That's why I've told you NASA, if you want to find out the source for this, just Google NASA and Harvard University. In fact, Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist, talks about this on one of his podcasts. They use, similar to our program, a primitive living nomadic experience with their astronaut teams in places like the Utah and Arizona deserts to teach them about teamwork and trust. Because what they discovered was the classes, the team building experiences that were designed didn't have as much of an impact as these raw kind of natural experiences. So primitive living becomes the metaphor for life. When I go out to the field and I'm helping a kid with his bow drill set, or I'm helping a young woman figure out how to build a shelter, when I bring out food, as therapists do, fresh food, fruit for the children, when the staff are teaching them how to cook, and in the early phases of their program, cooking for them, this all becomes a microcosm for life. When you walk into a therapist office, you don't give a kid an apple or an orange. You don't teach them how to build a shelter. Again, you're intimidating, and just by nature of the fact that you're walking in as a psychotherapist, and the kid is under the microscope, so to speak. I love it when a kid comes with a packet of assignments completed, and I gently ask him or her or them to put it to the side for the moment, and let's talk about when they broke their bow drill fire stick over their knee after being frustrated. I love being at a family meeting at the end of a program when a child's trying to show their parents with pride beaming about how to make a bow drill fire by rubbing sticks together. And they don't get it for 45 minutes. And the parent invariably says to me, I would love to see the fire because that's fun. But what I'm more impressed about is that my child tried to do something for 45 minutes. That to me means more than if they had busted the fire in 10, 15 seconds, like some very talented bow drill firebusters can do. It becomes a metaphor. So I'm not talking about how you were fighting with your parents at home, or the disruptive behavior at school, or the school refusal, or the self-harm. I'm talking about all that stuff through the metaphor of wilderness therapy living. My very first day on my first assignment as a wilderness therapist in early spring of 1996, driving out to the field, sitting next to a staff member whose name was Clay, poetically, of course. I said, Clay, I know therapy, but I don't know wilderness therapy. I got the job on the spot because the previous therapist quit right before I showed up for my interview. So what is it? Well, why do we do it out here? Doesn't make sense to me. And he said, most of us don't live on the ground. Most of us live several hundred feet above the ground, meaning we're not connected to nature. We're not connected to our roots. We're not connected to our bodies. We're not connected to our feelings. Your child's mental health symptoms, their addictive compulsions, are all attempts to not be present in their own life. I talked to 2 reporters today from 2 different East Coast papers, and I explained to them. One of them asked, do clients end up in groups where there are different kinds of students with different presenting issues and diagnoses? And I said, in some ways, every child is different and unique and needs to be treated as such. And in some ways, we're all the same. Both of those things are true. And the magic comes when a child with acting in behaviors, with anxiety, with school refusal, sitting next to an acting out drug abusing client who stole his grandmother's pain medication during a holiday party. The magic happens when that acting in client turns to the acting out students and says, I never yelled at my grandmother. I never stole from my grandmother like you did. But here's what I did that's like that. Here's how I hid from my feelings. Here's how I avoided dealing with difficult things. When someone starts to see the sameness, which is almost a universal sign of mental health, when they start to see the sameness in the differences, they're getting it at a deeper level. I've heard people say, especially my second book, because I use a lot of experiences from our program, but I wanted to write a non-parenting book. But I write about parenting sometimes because we're all children of parents. At any rate, I hear people say, if you don't have a child, I can't relate. But that's because you're not seeing the deeper truth that's being taught. I could talk about baseball. I could talk about anything I have any experience with to illustrate the same ideas, the same principle. Wilderness therapy is on the ground Being connected to nature is being connected to yourself because you are nature. Joseph Campbell says it's the goal to match your heartbeat with nature. In other words, to match your nature with nature, a capital N. Teaching them how to struggle, empathizing, understanding. For the most part, even the students that resist the entire clinical operation of wilderness therapy graduate with a sense of pride, graduate with a felt lived experience of having met something outside of the comfort zone. We don't strip kids down and make them feel uncomfortable. They already feel uncomfortable in their lives. And wilderness therapy exposes that. Some of them are really good. They're really therapy savvy. They know how to give a good session. Some people have been introduced and even been at treatment centers for the treatment of addiction. They know the 12 steps. They know about surrender and letting go. They'll quote those slogans or those steps to me. And I'll often find myself saying, I don't see the surrender. I don't feel it by the way you've been dealing with your feelings this week. The anger, the frustration, the control. You fight Mother Nature and you lose 100 times out of 100. Like I said earlier, you don't have to give a lecture when a child builds a shelter that falls down during a moderate wind. The lesson is inherent. You want your children to listen to your wisdom? Think about this. They get put in a situation far outside of their physical comfort zone, and they need the adults to help them stay safe and comfortable. You can take nothing for granted. That's really the biggest difference between, in my experience, wilderness therapy. It's an immersion into mindfulness. There's nothing to distract. We don't let them bring in seemingly harmless entertainment. We don't have them bring in books. All of the focus is therapy. And we do that, again, not to be punitive or strip them away, not because we want to deprive them, but because we're asking them to look at themselves in the mirror. Only the mirror is what happens in wilderness therapy during a rainstorm or a lightning drill or a snowstorm. The logical consequences that nature doles out are something beyond our control. Natural and logical consequences are associated with children developing healthy resilience, discipline. We try to come up with, we parents, you and I, we try to come up with ideas and lessons and consequences that make sense. Nature just doesn't. I remember one time we were on a hike. I was in the back of the group hiking with the student that I was having the session with. So as we were walking along the trail, I was the last in our group, along with the client, to walk across a bunch of garbage sitting on the trail. So I called the entire group back because one of our ethics is that we leave no trace and we leave the wilderness better than when we found it. So I called everybody back. It took a minute or so, 2 minutes maybe. We ended up standing in a circle around some garbage, and I just said, "Who's in charge of the trash on this hike?" One of the students raised his hand, had that trash bag hanging off his backpack, and I said, "You missed this." Just said it very matter of fact, plain. He put it in his garbage can, and I said, "Keep going." I don't have to give a lecture. Wilderness teaches it, and winter in the wilderness teaches it more profoundly. Like I said, it adds intensity and amplifies the lessons in life. I have a fun story. I think it's fun. When I was in undergraduate school, I made it my goal to get straight A's during college. And somewhere around my junior year, I got a B plus in a class that was called, uh, I think it was called Temporal Life with Relationships in the Family. It's some weird name. At the time, I didn't even understand it, but it looked easy. It was at the right time. I took it. I got a B plus. And this lesson comes from this class. The reason I'm telling you I got a B plus is because of my obsession, my ambition to get straight A's. I retook the class, got an A minus the second time. I took it back-to-back semesters. This comes from that. In one of the classes, we watched a documentary on the mother of the year in Utah that year, whatever year that was. And it was amazing. It was exhausting to watch her day. She was a stay-at-home mom. She had a preschool. She had art supplies. She had time for exercise and calisthenics. In fact, at one point when the kids were going crazy in their playroom, she gathered them up around her to do organized calisthenics. The irony, of course, being they were already playing and getting exercise, but she was moving into this formal setting. When the kids took their naps, she cleaned up. They didn't. She did. It was part of her daily schedule. Then when they woke up for their naps, she had more activities. We watched an impressively exhausting day, coming away with just a little bit more understanding about why Utah leads the nation oftentimes in psychiatric medications for anxiety and depression, especially for women. That's a true story. And then the next day, we didn't have any discussion about it. It ended, class ended. We come back the next class period, and we watched a documentary of a primitive tribe, I believe in Africa, if I'm not mistaken. We watched their daily routine and rituals. In this family, there was a separation of labor. The men went out with the older boys and the young men, and they hunted and they gathered. The women stayed at home near the village and fished and took care of the village. They carried around with them or had by their sides all of the young children. When the boys got old enough, they went off with the fathers. Then at night after the hunt, they would sit around the fire, and the leaders of the village, of the tribe, would tell stories, sing songs. And what was cool was the songs were about their religion, but their religion was about their life. It was about hunting and gathering and family and village and tradition. It was all the same thing. And after the second class ended, we came back for the third class, and our professor said, let's talk about these two. And the whole thesis of the course was this. She said, we have become so removed from the intrinsic lessons of life. In fact, there's a book that she wrote that's sitting up on my shelf up there, a textbook, where she talks about this. She says, years ago, we would make ice cream as a family activity. Before it was even made electrically, it was a hand crank. This is before my time, of course. Somebody was in charge of the ingredients. Somebody was in charge of the ice and the salt that you put around it. And somebody was in charge of taking their turn at the hand crank. And it took a long time. And at the end, because everybody was impatient, you got this soft serve ice cream. And everybody loved it. And it was about the size of something that could fit in your hand. And now, she contrasted, now we buy a half a gallon of ice cream to save time. For what? Typically to watch TV or get on our screens. We used to spend less time doing housework. Our houses used to be smaller. We didn't do laundry throughout the week. We had a couple of outfits. It took 2 or 3 people to clean the rug in the main room. It would be taken outside and somebody would hang it and somebody would beat it with those things that you beat rugs with to clean it. And she gave example after example. The only exception she made was medicine. Medicine was one of the advancements that seems to inherently move humanity forward. Was her idea. And she said, more primitive cultures, it's all wrapped up together. It's all holistic. There's no separation of religion and life and tradition and what it takes to live and belong. Abraham Maslow has a famous theory in sociology where he says you have to take care of the safety and physical first. And then when you have that managed, you move on to belonging needs. And then you eventually move on to ego integrity, or what I would call becoming and getting in touch with your authentic self. But what Dr. Barr was teaching us is that primitive cultures have that all together. She cited from a 1969 journal of it might have been the Harvard Medical Journal. I'm not sure, but it was a prestigious journal about a woman who said, "When I was younger, we used to peel the peas together as a family, and now I can buy them frozen or in a can." And she goes on to say, "But I had to replace that activity with something else because it wasn't just peas that we were getting. The whole experience was something that brought the family together." So wilderness therapy goes back in time to primitive living. I know a lot of models today are using a lot more adventure activities, fun, because in Western culture, we've replaced work with recreation a lot as a way of building togetherness. But there's something like Thomas Edison said, nothing is so beautiful as work, as industry. Showing up with your overalls, as he said. That's what work looks like. That's what life looks like. And wilderness therapy takes it to that level. The lesson is inherent. From the journey of the heroic parent regarding all of this, I wrote, wilderness therapy teaches that within the context of struggling to survive, a person learns who he is, what it means to belong, and what it means to be interdependent. Within the wilderness context, one learns values. If you choose not to make a fire, you'll be cold and unable to eat a hot meal. If you aren't careful when building your shelter, you'll have an uncomfortable night of sleep. In situations like this, truths about preparation, patience, and organization are inescapable. It's in the context of your life that the lessons, you don't learn about belonging from some lesson. You learn about it as you participate in the experience of life. You don't learn who you are through a textbook or a team building activity. You learn it by living your life. And that's what wilderness therapy does so well. I love Will Wright. He runs the podcast on wilderness therapy, the history of wilderness therapy. And he wrote a paper years ago. And he was quoting one of the founders of one of the first wilderness programs who concluded this. He said, whenever we adopted what we've come to call contrived experiences, the overall impact diminished for the participants. It's not about getting out of the weather so that you can do therapy. The weather is the therapist. Building the shelter is the therapy. In addition to, of course, all the weather, all the wilderness issues, we celebrate traditional holiday meals, traditions, stories, lessons. We allow people, we encourage, we ask people if they're willing to share their own stories. We want children, we don't want them to miss home again because we want them to feel pain. We want them to start to value what they're missing, which is home. We celebrate and appreciate family. Even when I've been out there for just a day or two, I've appreciated my family and my holiday time more than any other time in my life, like I mentioned at the beginning. You can write letters, talk to if you are a current wilderness family, talk to the therapist that's working with your child and ask what they're doing with gifts. Sometimes we don't want lots of things out there. We don't want you to from a place of guilt, try to make your child happy. But it could look like letters from home. It could look like a photo album. It could look like a Frisbee that they can use during their mandatory fun time. Mandatory fun time is a playful euphemism we use for when we're talking about recreation. Because some kids want to opt out, and so we playfully call it mandatory fun time. Maybe it's a hacky sack. Maybe it's a football. Something the entire group can use. If your therapist allows for any extra treats to come in, which we don't encourage a lot because we want to reduce the sugar intake and processed foods, and we have plenty of food, especially during the winter. But if they do allow for some fresh fruit, nuts, beef jerky, something like that, they'll ask for enough for the entire group. So talk to your therapist about their process. And like I said, it's not about just pointing out to the child that they're gone from home, but showing them the path to get back to home, to get back to you, and to get back to this home, right? The home that is found inside of us. To enjoy and cement the lessons of the program. Somebody said one time that wilderness therapy is like life, only more so. And what I say is that the winter in the wilderness is like wilderness therapy, only more so. And then we plan for future holidays. We look forward to you spending time with your children spending time with you in 2023 in December. And then to celebrate and share your family traditions as a way to wrap up all of this. So, what are my take homes? You don't have to apologize for your children's feelings. Don't apologize for let them have them. Let them own them. As the poets teach us, our pain is our joy unmasked, right? And the great movie Shadowlands, based on C.S. Lewis's life, toward the end of his wife's life, she reminded him that the pain that he will feel when she leaves is connected to the joy that they had together as a couple, as a married couple. And you can't have one without the other. That, in essence, is sometimes the problem underneath mental illness. We can't, if you think of a dam, damming up a river, you can't just dam part of the water, the bad part of the water. You dam all of it. If you block your pain, you in some sense are blocking your joy. If you seek not to experience grief and loss, you'll have to not love. And psychotherapy is integrating all the feelings. My wife and I joke there's a sign on somebody's lawn with large letters JOY during the holiday season in our neighborhood. And my wife and I joke that we want to put on our lawn other words like sad and mad, scared, because we want to feel all the feelings. We want to honor all the feelings. We need you to work through your grief. You need to work through your grief and guilt instead of asking your child to forgive you. Your child's forgiveness of you for you is your ego. Now, we want your children to forgive you, but not for you. We definitely don't want them to forgive you for you. We think that's actually part of the original problem in the first place. We want your children to forgive you because they need to be free. They need to be free from your mistakes, and they need to be free from their own mistakes, their own humanity. Letting them struggle is a part of resilience and self-confidence. Valuing the pain and the struggle is a part of embracing all of us. Suffer with them. One of the strongest experiences I had as a father while my son was in the wilderness in December 16 years ago was how full of grief I was, and concurrently how I knew I was doing the right thing. I didn't know that I would feel both of those things at the same time so profoundly. Show your children how to suffer authentically. And do your work. You want to give a gift to your child? Do your work. Go to therapy. Go to Al-Anon and Codependence Anonymous. And if you learn nothing else, you'll know how your child feels. Walking into a room of strangers that you don't quite relate to, and in the back of your mind, you're saying you don't need to be here and these people are worse off than you. That's the same voice that's in your child's head. So even if you don't walk away with some epiphany, you have an empathic experience because you know what you're asking your child to do. Learning to let go of control. Read what they're reading, learn what they're learning. Honor their process. Family and friends, if you're not a parent, read their favorite therapy book. Read The Night Not Rest the Armor, a book that we ask all of our clients to read. Read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Honor what they're going through at the same time. And then, of course, the non-assignment. The non-assignment means it's okay for you to enjoy your holiday. Most mental health involves paradox. And most mental illness involves black or white thinking, either or thinking. But paradox is both and. Paradox is I'm missing my child and I still know they're in the right place far away from me. So the non-assignment is be present with your grief and be present with the people that you are around. Because you get to have one more day on this earth with people that you love. All right, folks, I'm going to put off any questions until the broadcast later in the week. So upcoming announcements. February 1st, I'll be running a multi-couples intensive that's run by me. It's Finding You. It's our typical intensive, but it's going to be all couples. So if this is not for couples that are in acute conflict, but couples that trust each other enough that they want to bear witness to each other's healings, to understand each other's dilemmas. That's February 1st through 4th. February 24th, as I mentioned earlier, will be the next version of our conscious parenting workshop, which I will be running all day. And then later on in the year, I'm going to be teaching a masterclass on attachment-based therapy, the therapy that Evoke employs. My 2 books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, also great holiday gifts, are available on Amazon and Audible, and I narrated The Audacity to Be You. If you want to do a deep dive in your own work, in fact, this will be the truest, most passionate thing I can say all night. And I believe this as a participant. If you want to give a gift to your children, come to Finding You for you. As the great writer Anne Lamott says, the greatest gift a parent can do, the greatest gift a parent can give a child is their own work and their own healing. Finding You is a deep dive, a springboard for new people, an accelerator for people who have some therapy experience about finding and discovering your authentic self. We also have online versions. January 27th through 29th is the next offering. It's half the time. It's about a third of the costs. It doesn't involve travel, of course. So if those resources are difficult for you to spend at this time of your life, the online version is great. We started during the pandemic. I was skeptical myself, and after running the first one, I thought this is going to be a forever part of our program. Contact intensives at evoketherapy.com for more information or to register. We have online support groups for our Wilderness families and our alumni families. December 8th, this Thursday, is the next offering. Sometimes my broadcasts do conflict with those. That will be the case this Thursday night, December 8th. We recommend that you attend the support group and that you watch the recorded version or listen to the recorded version of this later on our YouTube channel or your podcast app. December 8th at 6:30 is our next offering. Once a month, we have an alumni-only meeting. December 27th is that offering. And then we have a once a month meeting for all of our intensives alumni. December 13th is that next offering. Contact Malia at evoketherapy.com for information or to register. If you want a personal coach, a life coach, marriage coach, co-parenting, a parenting coach, a family coach, you can contact coaching at evoketherapy.com. We have attachment-based therapists and coaches that are trained in attachment-based therapy that can provide you with coaching. We have Pursuits Adventure Trips for young adults and families. Think therapy light or sober fun. They're custom designed anywhere in the world from 3 to 30 days based on your family's specific needs and also what you want to do for fun. Any one of the, not Antarctica, but any other continent, is up for grabs. We ask all current family members, parents to go to 6 12-step support groups just to try them out. Any combination of Al-Anon, CODA, Families Anonymous, or adult children. You can also go to refugerecovery.org or NAMI.org for the National Alliance on Mental Illness to get free classes and resources in your local community. All these broadcasts are available on your favorite podcast app or Spotify. Just search Finding You and Evoke Therapy Podcast, or you can go to soundcloud.com and find us there with the same search. You can also find us on YouTube. All of these broadcasts get shared on our YouTube channel. You can look at them there, and we'll look at the videos and the slides there. You can find Evoke Therapy Programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter and Instagram using the handles at Evoke Therapy and at Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. You can also find Evoke Therapy Intensives on Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy Intensives. On Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And of course, we have a blog each week contributed to by our staff, curated by Malia, who does a wonderful job. If you want to give back before the end of the year to get that tax write-off, we have 3 charitable partners. We match their gift. These are our organizations that help folks get treatment who cannot afford it. ChooseMentalHealth.org, sky'sthelimitfund.org, and evokefamilyfoundation.org are our 3 charitable partners. And my next broadcast will be December 8th, as I mentioned. That'll be a live Q&A for the full hour. You can invite family and friends and siblings. You can bring questions from them. You can ask questions about them. It's a wide open hour. You can always send questions in advance at a webinar at evoketherapy.com. I'm happy to answer them live. Then you can listen to them later on the podcast. I hope this is a helpful point of contact to you all. I hope you have a sacred and wonderful holiday season and are able to be present with all of your feelings, your grief, which is tied to your love, and also the joy and the presence that you have with the people that you get to be around this holiday season. And on behalf of the people that love you and that you love, thank you for showing up tonight and being willing to look at yourself and do your work. It's the greatest gift that you can give to those that you love. I'll see you in 2 nights, December 8th at 6:30 p.m. for that live Q&A. Have a great evening, folks, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.